Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast,
a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent LaBrada, and a very special guest we'll be announcing in just a second. But first, we do want to remind you guys again, this is Season 2, Episode 2. We're excited for the new season. This is our first interview being back, and we can't thank you guys enough for your support. You're the best listeners in the world, and we thank you. And with that, over to you, man.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. This is Brent. Again, Episode 2, Season 2. Super excited for our next guest. He is the founder of Say It Once Dog Training. He officially, as of 2 minutes ago, has the sexiest hair on TikTok. His name is Mr. Vinnie Somma. How are you, buddy?
Good, my man. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you guys for taking the time to do everything that you guys do. And I can't tell you guys enough how much young trainers should appreciate everything you guys do, because I wish I had this 10 years ago. It would fucking help out a boatload.
Man,
thank you, man.
Very sweet of you. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Well, we spend a lot of time stalking people on the internet, or doing research, as we call it.
Stalking people.
So as we do research, cool thing is, we had the privilege of interviewing a lot of dog trainers on here, and, we straight up asked them, we go, so who else should we interview? Who do you guys like? And you want to know how many people, a lot of people said, check out Say It Once, check out Say It Once. And I was like, all right, so we're going to check out Say It Once. And, man, just getting to see you, you feel like you get to know someone on social media, right? And on top of that, I was looking through your content, I was looking at the Instagrams, I was looking at the TikTok. And the funny thing is, I didn't even pay attention to how many followers you had. But fuck, man, you have such an amazing following. And I know I'm sure you have your own little recipe to why that is. And I have a feeling it has a lot to do with the way you treat your community around you. And I want to talk a little bit about that later on. But I guess let's go ahead and just jump into this podcast the same way we work with every special guest that we have on. Let's start in the beginning. Who was Vinnie before he was a dog trainer, and how did he turn into a dog trainer?
Yeah, man. So I was 19. I moved out to Chicago. I was a pretty good hockey player, so I thought that was it. My brother went to D1, got a scholarship, went out, played pro. And my brother's one of the biggest idols in my life. He's 5 years older. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to follow his footsteps. Mm-hmm. And I was on my path. And at 19 years old, moved out to Chicago. I got fucked up. I got a really bad concussion. And like an idiot, you guys are good. You know how it is. Went back way too soon.
Right.
Just was being stupid. Yeah, I'm fine. I can do this. And then I got hurt again.
Yeah.
And I had to move back home with my parents. That was the end of hockey and life as I knew it. So I was 19 years old, living back at home with my mom and dad, my grandma, and our dog, our Newfoundland Gunner. And no idea what I'm going to do with my life, right? And 6 months go by, I'm still not getting better. 9 months go by, still not getting better, except now I'm 75 pounds heavier. I'm severely depressed. I'm anxious. I'm just a mess, basically. You know what I mean? And I was in a bad state. And my brother was talking about getting a puppy. And you guys ever know when someone says something and it sounds like such a good idea and you can't get it out of your brain, right? That's all you fucking think about all day long. And I couldn't get it out. I'm like, man, you know what? I really want a puppy. So I called my uncle. My uncle Andy trained dogs in the 80s and 90s, the old Keeler method. I called him and he was like, okay, well, before you get a puppy, you can't just get a puppy, Vinny. Before you get a puppy, let's read, let's talk, let's go through it. So, he lives in Columbus, Ohio, and I live in Pittsburgh. So I would literally call him for 2-3 hours, and bless his heart, fucking greatest guy on this planet, would listen to me, talk to me, walk me through it. And then I got my first dog, my English Mastiff Trigger, who, honest to God, how sometimes we say, hey, he saved my life and so on and so forth.
Right.
If I wouldn't have got that dog, just based off the path that I was on, because for concussion, they didn't do as much 10 years ago as they did now. So I thought that I was not going to be alive if I would have kept fucking, going down this path. So I get this dog who fucking makes you, hey, I want to go outside. Cool, let's go for a walk. They force you, hey, I'm bawling my fucking eyes out on the ground. Hey, he comes up over to you. And you get this dog who literally changes the way that you look at life. He gives you something to love again. He gives you a purpose. And I'm like, it was the coolest thing in the world for me to wake up and train this little 9-week-old English Mastiff puppy, you know what I mean? Just cruising around on the floor. And I'd call my uncle, like, he ate out of Gunner's dog dish. What do I do? You know what I mean? And I'm just calling him all the time. So that's how I got started. Was I got this puppy, and I had an awesome mentor, my uncle, who trained dogs. And he was the first one who showed me the world of dog training. And then he came in when Trigger was 9 weeks old, because I was crying about him eating out of another dog's dog dish, and didn't really understand anything about dog training or being a productive dog owner. And he came into town, and like, I was blown away with what he could teach a 9-week-old puppy. I didn't realize that this was even possible, you know. And you watch it in front of you, and I still remember it to this day. But you watch this shit in front of you, and you're like, this is magic. Like, this guy is a wizard, you know. And it was just basic shit, right? But basic shit to somebody who doesn't know anything, is incredible,
mind blowing. Yeah,
it really is, right? And sometimes, like, I still get chills thinking about, like, when I go to a client's house and I show them something and they're like weeping. I can't believe my dog can do this. And you're like, dude, that's why you do this job, right? That brings me back to that experience with my uncle. And he was my first mentor. He taught me everything I knew at the time. Well, he taught me, and then the OG of dog training, who everybody our age watched on TV, Caesar. You know what I mean? Yeah. See, and that's, you know, the thing about Caesar, because people love to hate on Caesar, right? I absolutely love and respect the guy for everything that he did for dog training. And, you know, but you watch him on TV, you read his books, and it's just like, it made dog training so cool, you know, and like, I wanted to train a dog. And that's how I started. So I started training my own dog, Trigger. And, we have our dog. I still have it actually in my house, our little dog training notebook from when he was 9 weeks old, 10
that's
weeks
awesome.
old, so on and so forth. And you know, we wrote down all the tricks and shit that we would teach. And I forget, we're like at 80, we were at 80 something. I mean, this guy knew how to take my socks off, how to put laundry away, how to turn off light switches. Because that's all I did. I was 20 years old, a kid with nothing else to do. And so he turned a year old, and a year old in 3 days, we went and got his therapy dogs international test.
Nice.
And we passed, right? And the trainer there gave me, you know, amazing compliments. And I was like, dude, this is, you know, it was pretty cool. I was so proud of him, and I was proud of us together as a team. And from there, my parents had a restaurant, and one of their patrons said, "Hey, Vinny, or hey, Susan, my dog's having a problem, and I see your son post all these videos," because I was just shooting shit on like an iPhone, posting them up on Facebook, and like, can you help? And I know he can help me. And at the time, I'm like, I don't know. I can train my dog. I don't know what I'm doing, but sure, I'll come over. Why not? Right?
Nice.
So she had a golden retriever, Sydney, who wouldn't walk down the street, right? Did the old freeze up method, as we see 1,000 times before. And so I went out there with, you know, when we're talking about Caesar and Keeler method, the only things I have in my pouch are a choke chain and a slip lead. Right? These are the only two things I had. And so I went out with a slip lead, and we did a little pressure release, and within like 3-4 minutes, got the dog walking down the street. And within 15 minutes, we had the human doing some, you know, a little bit of nothing like what it looks like now, but a little bit of figure eights and a little bit of heel walking. And I went back to her house next week, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to start a dog training business for you. I'm going to set you up with business cards."
Whoa.
And dude, she was one of my guardian angels. And like, I swear to God, I still have chills thinking about Laura to this day. Like, the amount of shit, like, in order for anybody to be successful in life, someone has to help them. Right. And it's, you know,
true.
And first was my uncle, and then was Laura. And I was like, for someone to go out on a limb like that, like, she would just help me so much. And, you know, I'm 29. So this was when I was 21 years old. So this is 9 years ago. And I don't know. So that's how I got started. Was I learned a lot from my uncle. I learned a lot from the school of hard knocks. I made 1,000 mistakes, you know, and I'm not ashamed to do it. I've been doing this fucking long enough to realize, my first few years of dog training are completely different than this year, which is completely different from last year, which will be different from next year.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what, man? That's not only is that's very enlightening, and that's cool. And thank you for sharing that story. But now it makes a lot of sense as to why you're as involved with the community and helping other people as you are.
Yeah. Thank you, man. That's something I take a lot of pride in. You know, I don't really look at my customers as customers. They're our family, and I say it all the time, but it's not a cheesy pickup line. It's not like we need more customers for me to go, you know, you're our family. But yeah, that's the way I look at the Say It Once. It should be, you're part of our Say It Once family, and I want to make it as comforting for everybody as possible. And so yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes back from especially Andy.
Here's a question that I've been asking people lately. So your uncle was your mentor in terms of the first person to really help you train your dog Trigger, right? And then this was a client named Laura that ended up loving what you did and helped you start the business and business cards, and she was just like a great supporter. Who would you say, and it doesn't have to be someone you know personally, like for me, it was just people that you look up to, like autobiographies and stuff. Who would you say are some of your bigger mentors or people that inspire you who aren't necessarily dog trainers, just in life in general? Like, are there hockey players? I mean, other than your big brother, just trying to get a better feel for how you see things.
Yeah, dude. Man, I'm going to try to pick something that's not cheesy, but my fucking mom and dad are the greatest people on the planet. Okay. Most dog trainers, like, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't go to college, and, I was a pretty smart kid in high school, and my dad, dude, yeah, I'm really lucky. I have really, really good parents. And my dad, when I was just like, this was going on with Laura, right at this time frame, I remember my mom asking, like, hey, are you going to go to college? What's the plan? And I didn't want to go, right? Because now I had the seed in my head. It's a fucking sickness, right? You're like, dude, I want to do this for a living. Yeah. And I remember this story so vividly. I met with my dad at the top of the basement steps, and I'm like, Dad, here's the thing. I do not want to go to college, and I want to train dogs for a living. And dude, I'm going to fucking tear up. He looks at me and he goes, then go do it and have fun. And, you have somebody like that who, it's fucking hard, dude. It's hard to start a business from absolutely nothing. And, just say, hey, my 20-year-old son who could have been really good at hockey is going to now start a dog training business. Yeah. But I respect the hell out of my parents for that, for letting me choose my own fate. And thank God they did.
Yeah. Yeah. You were blessed with good parents, man. That's
very much so.
Lucky. That's very good. That's very important. Now a question for your uncle. Was he a professional dog trainer or just kind of like a hobbyist?
More of a hobbyist. Yeah. So, I mean, he did it on the side for a long time, but it wasn't his main gig. Although I don't know how many professional dog trainers had only one gig back in the day. It'd be something I'd be curious. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know how much money they could have made.
Yeah, like when we were kids, like people were like, if you were going in the dog industry, you were like a vet or a vet tech, or worked at a zoo if you were in the animal industry,
Yeah, like teaching people after work.
Yeah, no one thought that dog training could be a career that pays for your house or your car or, other things like that. But we'll get into that a little bit later.
Here's another logistical question for you. So we were talking then about Laura, which was about 2011, 2012, based on age, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, smartphones were a thing, but not really. And social media was barely kind of budding. I don't think Instagram was around and Facebook was kind of new. So were you posting knowing that social media was going to keep growing, or were you just kind of putting stuff out there to put stuff out there? I'm thinking in terms of, even now with social media being what it is, we've got so many listeners, all over the world who they don't quite understand just how important it is to make sure that you're putting yourself out there, that people know that you're here.
Yeah. So it was just because that's honest to God, that was the most fun I've ever had at that time, was just training my dog. And I just shared it, right? I was just like, okay, well, I love this. I'm putting this up here. Hopefully other people love this. And, there's a lot of old videos. I don't take any of my old stuff down, even the old training videos that I'm like, oh, Vinny, why would you say that? Because why would I? You know what I mean? So it's all still up. It's all still up on my personal and/or.
Well, you get to see the growth. That's the cool part. Yeah,
well, it's part of the journey. Well, that's the beautiful thing. Like Brent and I, we've laughed about this probably a few times. And somebody was kind enough to lie to my face, and they were like, yeah, I just listened to the podcast. I listened to the first episode and it was great. And I was like, no, it wasn't, but thank you. But yeah, I was like, the first episode is like 6 minutes long and it's not good, but I appreciate what you're trying to do. Right. So, but I would never take that down either, just because it's part of the journey. And frankly, like for listeners and for people, because I'm sure you watch, and have watched other dog trainers online and stuff like that, so it's fun to be able to grow alongside them.
Absolutely.
Right? So absolutely. It's important not to take that stuff down.
Dude, 100%. And that last line that you just said is really important, to grow alongside them. because this is one of the most toxic industries on the planet. At least, you know, we're on the inside of it. So my vision's like this, right? But I'm like, dude, this industry, there are so many dogs out there that you don't got to worry about somebody else. I'm going to tell you that right now, because your only competition is yourself, right? You should be uplifting other trainers. We should be helping other people. So there's a dog trainer here in Pittsburgh, Paul Anthony, a great guy, old canine guy, canine officer, just an awesome guy. And he invited me out to his place 2-3 years ago. And, you know, another balance trainer in the area. And I'm like, skeptical, right? You're like, he's going to try to steal something. Let me go. Just the most honest, upfront, just the nicest guy of all time. Like, oh shit. Like, this is how I guess it should, but it makes sense. That's how it should be. What's he care about another dog trainer? It's the less dogs he's got to worry about.
True.
Well, you know, something that we were talking about with Michael Ellis that I found very interesting was it's kind of this new world now where, like, the younger dog trainers understand the importance of social media and mixing it up and talking, whereas the older dog trainers kind of have this, like, old school carpentry, you don't give out your secrets type thing.
Dude,
but,
yeah.
You know, and what I found really fascinating, and I wanted to get Michael Ellis's perspective because he's got, like, an Instagram and stuff too, but their thing was like Learberg and his working dogs and his school. So it's just a different perspective from like Brent and I, right? And I was just trying to ask him, like, you know, without this feeling like a pointed question, because you can answer in any which way you want. Do you find that there are obvious upsides to social media. Do you find that there are any downsides? And you can say no.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be downsides. I think that one of the biggest downsides is how, if you can't take criticism well, social media is a motherfucker. And that's something I like, you know, you gotta grow some thick, you gotta grow some thick skin pretty quick. And that really hurt. So I've been training dogs for a long time, and we've always had a really successful business. Like, especially the past 3 years, we've been really, really successful in Pittsburgh. And then I blew up on TikTok on like last year. One of my clients was like, "Hey, why aren't you on TikTok? You're an idiot." So I'm like, "All right, I'll go on here." Right. And the only other guy on there was John Gata. Right. That was it. It was Gata, who already had a fucking verified check mark. I'm like, how does this guy have a verified check mark? And what's going on here? So I just started putting out like okay, well, here's some of my information. Right. And people ate it up. And then I got big, and then people decided not to eat it up. Right. Because now there's a lot of people going, I fucking hate this guy. And you get nasty messages, you get nasty videos, you get nasty shit. Then you go to sleep at night and you're like, man, this is just toxic. And dude, I shit you not. This is a couple of months back, probably January this year. I'm like, I was like eating like an idiot again, getting stressed out. I feel anxious again, back to the same trend just because negative comments.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, man, this is something that I say to a lot of our guests who have like big followings too. We talked about this with Tyler Muto, Tommy Davis, Michael, like, you name it, right? all the bigger names, right? Sean O'Shea. I'm never surprised that people talk their shit on social media, because that's like almost like what it's for, it seems like. But I'm always surprised that it works. I'm always surprised that guys, but I guess you get tired of it after a while. Like, I hear you.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, and it's just, it's hard, because then especially as the account started to grow, then you feel that I felt just pressure, this annoying. And then I just started blocking accounts that I didn't want to see anymore. Cause I would like actually go on here to see, what'd you say about me? It's like, dude, that's such an unhealthy.
And you have your guard up. Yeah. You got your,
I'm like, Vinny, why do you care?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In 10 years, you're going to look back and go, what did that person have any effect on your life? Just block them, move on. It ain't that big of a deal. You are true to yourself. And that's the thing is, and I had to ask myself, is there anything I'm doing wrong? No. Do I believe everything in myself and what I'm doing? Yes. Then shut the fuck up and move forward.
Yeah. Cause it's a little gaslighting, it's a little gaslighting, and that can sometimes lead to feeling like an imposter. Right. And like feeling this imposter syndrome in dog training is super real. Right. Because there's so much information out there. It's so interesting, unless you've actually sat down and like learned to form right? Like I started in Keeler too. That's why his book's way back there. And I started in Keeler and worked my way out of Keeler over the years. And it's interesting because, you know, yeah, when you hear a good point from one side or you hear someone bashing what you're doing, you know, it can definitely confuse the shit out of you for a brief moment until you start looking at things analytically, like, well, no, I was affected. This is working. And as much as someone might say this is wrong, but you're like, but there's value coming out of what I'm doing. Right. So it can't be wrong. Right. So that's an interesting thing.
And you're getting 10 to 100 to 1 messages of, dude, you've helped me with this. You've helped me with this.
Right.
And you almost because you get them, you kind of like, just like, I know. Cause you focus just on that one negative. Right. Yeah. But that affects your entire day. So of all the positives that social media has, and dude, there are so many. And I'm a huge marketing guy in a sense of I love marketing and I love marketing and social media. We can talk about that at any point. But I think the biggest downside would be just getting stuck in a negative rut and, you know, or you spend too much time on it. That was a fucking kiss of death too, right? You could spend 6 hours on TikTok like an ass.
Well, I'll be very frank. Like, I mean, we were looking at reviews on the podcast the other day and we were just like, okay, iTunes 5 star, or no, not iTunes, Spotify 5 stars. This one, okay, good, we're doing great. And then I remember seeing like 2 1 stars on iTunes and being like, oh, I gotta read these comments, you know. But they weren't comments; they were just star clicks. Just someone just be like, fuck them, you know what I mean? And I remember being like, oh, because this is the only platform that we've actually done consistently, right? Like,
yeah. 100%, dude. And it's your fucking baby, right? So you take everything personal because I've grown this thing from a seed, right? From a seed of nothingness. Yeah. And now you're here. And, you know, so when someone tries to take you down, the last thing you ever want to do is like, listen, I've been down there. Yeah. I'm only going up from here. And, you know, it's hard. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's something that I wish more people understood, because what you're saying there, at least in my head, has a segue for some potential interesting conversation that could have some advice in it for newer trainers, because I couldn't agree with you more. Something like this, it is your baby. We take a lot of time out of our day to do this. It's not free to do this. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes whatever. But we do it because we want to make good content, because we know people like it, and people tell us that, like, just like you, right? We get lots of support and everything else. We've had some phone calls with some listeners who have reached out to us, you know, over whoever else, because they're having issues with their dogs and they wanted our advice, right? And we talk to them, and they'll shoot us a text a couple days later, like, bro, that totally helped. You were right, you know. But what I find, you know, if you think of things that way, what I find helpful in that is, if you look at it as your baby, or as you, however you want to see it, but intrinsically attached to you, something that I've never found so true is, as you grow as an individual, your business grows with you. Like, the better you get, the bigger it gets. And it's like it goes hand in hand. And like you were saying, when you fall into these ruts, which happens because we're human, you know, the business suffers, even if it's something as little as like, oh shit, I forgot to text what's their name back, and, you know, and stuff like that. But it's something, right? So I've always found that very interesting, as like, from a business owner's perspective, because to me, this is new. You know, nobody in my family, you know, I have one person in my extended family who's gone to college. Everybody else, you know, we're you know, and I'm the first, I think I'm the only business owner in the family, like at any capacity. So I have major imposter syndrome, like, all the time, especially these days when we've been busy enough that I'm hiring on employees and interns and assistants and stuff like that. So I have to check myself often. And honestly, as much as we joke about it on the podcast, the reason why I do stuff like jujitsu and boxing and working out and everything else is, it's honestly just to give me something to do, because I'm a very like busy person. But also it keeps me I don't want this to sound wrong. It keeps me like proud of myself, because I can do these things well. Yeah. So it's like, if I can win at this, then I can win at that too.
Yeah, you feel competent at life. You know, like doing things outside of your normal daily routine. You're just like, I'm multidimensional. You know, like,
it adds something to you, and it gives you something to hold on to when stuff's not going well. If it's for me, I take pride in this kind of thing. you know, wow, today was like super hot. Like it's hot enough out here that even if you're not outside, it's not like I'm working dogs in the blazing heat, but even if it's like the way that I get away with working dogs out here is once they're good enough to the point that I can't really work them here at the house anymore, in the early mornings, we go to the park while we can. And then when it gets too hot, we take them to stores. And I'm luckily enough that all kinds of places around here are super dog friendly and they totally understand with the heat, like you're welcome right on in. So we'll go to different stores and restaurants and things like that, certain malls and outdoor malls and stuff with like misters and fans. But it's so hot out here that just the travel, just getting in the car, waiting for it to cool off, that will drain you. You know what I mean? And so I take a lot of pride in being able to be like, look, it was a long ass day, but I had the energy to, you know, like my body was able to carry me through jujitsu and then through boxing and then through my clients and then through text messages and all this stuff. And then the podcast this evening, then I get to bed, you know, and it's just, it's something that makes me feel like, okay, well, if I can do that, then I'm fine tomorrow. Whatever comes at me, like I'm good.
Yep. I totally agree. Keeps you focused in a way.
Right.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Vinny. So kind of going back to, you know, before there was, you know, TikTok dog trainers and before there was Instagram dog trainers, you know, they're like me personally, I learned a lot like on Learberg. I learned a lot on, you know, online. Ian Dunbar, he had all his stuff out there. You know, I learned a lot of stuff for myself, people that fell into my lap or that I sought out. Who were some people, you know, growing up in the dog training game that you found their content in whatever form and you followed them, you read their books? Give us some of that story if you can.
Yeah, man. So it started with Paul Loeb, who was a dog trainer. I think it was back in the 80s. I have both of his books, and it's funny because his first book is more old school killer method training, and then his second book is significantly more progressive. And then I have two monks books, which early on, you know, those are just really good books. And offer a tremendous insight. And I'll explain that later. And then about 4 years ago, I found Learberg, and that to me was important because Michael explained it in ways that, like I explain everything in very simple terms because that's how I learn. And then you hear him explain it in the most professional way possible, and then immediately dumb it down so everybody else can understand it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's like, whoa, that is such a good skill to, and like he's saying these things. I'm like, dude, I swear I do these things. I just have no, like there was so much behind it. And that really helped. That brought a lot to the table. Who else? There's more books. And we talked about Caesar. Obviously, he was like one of my biggest inspirations of all time. Which I think every dog trainer, like I said before, loved him. But they also all started following. You know, like I did everything that he did to a T, and then you. And go opposite of the spectrum, back and forth, and you're like, okay, then you eventually find your.
Yeah, like I did Caesar stuff before I even did leash stuff. You know, like I did that. That was like my first couple years of foundation working at shelters. Was just a lot of energy stuff and body language stuff and eye contact stuff and, you know, slip lead and let's go for a walk and that kind of stuff. And you know, that gave me some form of a structure to follow. And then when I got onto actually learning tools, I was just like, oh, these things just make things a little bit easier. You know what I mean? Smoother too, right? Smoother, easier to communicate, you know?
Yeah. And people hear the word easier and they take that the wrong way. You know what I mean? Right. There's buzzwords that whether it's other trainers or people will try to hammer you on, and easier is a fucking buzzword.
Like
for
efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it less stressful for everybody, right? Especially if you know how to properly handle a tool, it will make it less stressful for the dog. It makes it less stressful for the person. And you know, the communication is it is smoother. I was going to say the word easier, but once again, that's a buzzword.
Well, you know, I like that you bring that up because a question that I was just about to ask you was, you know, how do you kind of dance that line between buzzwords that everybody has decided they don't like anymore versus still making the point? Because sometimes that buzzword is like the word, right? And I find it very interesting. This is something that I've learned, you know, just working with clients over time, is the words that you decide to use to describe something kind of depends on the person and what they resonate with. And, you know, some people just don't like certain words,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, I mean, how do you dance that line?
Well, and that's where I believe why we're so successful as a company as whole, just because of the employees that we have. Who, by the way, if I may, just one subtle brag, I do have the greatest employees of all time. Yeah. And you know, people see my fucking face on social media, right? Just because I have the best looking hair and I'm the best looking in the company, so it is what it is, right?
The best hair on TikTok.
Yeah. But like across the board, if while you're growing a company, you need to have good people in your 100%. Corner. And you, so I have, and I'm going to mention their names real quick because they mean more to me. And they're the reason I fucking work 16 hours a day, you know, because I'm like, listen, I have people depending on the shit that I do to make sure they get a paycheck so they can go home, they can save for their kids and so on and so forth. Like I have Jenna Lee, who runs my kennel, who's like my right-hand lady. She's the greatest fucking lady on the planet. We do Tuesday lives with her every question and answer every day. I have my amazing trainers. I have Anthony, Michelle. Anthony's been with me forever, ex-military guy, great guy. Michelle, who loves you guys, dude. So
she was the one that reached out to us.
Hi, Michelle.
What's up, Michelle?
You better mention my name.
Yeah, you know? What's up, Michelle? Shout out to Michelle.
Dude, that's what my girlfriend said when we talked to Tommy Davis. Like, tell him I said hello, and I was like,
dude,
why?
I heard you mention that. The same last name. Nice.
Yeah. Oh, in there. She's gonna be so happy to hear you say that. We're gonna go and hang out in New York, you know, in August, and she was like, oh my God, babe, I'm so excited to meet Tommy. And I was like, fucking, what about me, bro? Like, I'm going to be there too, you know?
He's like, I also train dogs.
Yeah. I'm like, hi, Dog Trainers podcast, but yeah, I guess not. All right.
Yeah. Our parents and our girlfriends don't give a shit about it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, right? Wow. But I got to give the rest of them props too. So Anthony, Michelle, I have Rachel, Aaron, Travis. Those are my trainers. Then we also have Donna, who's our new trainer. Emily, our new trainer. Joyce is our trainer at our kennel.
I love that. And I know you're having different locations now, right?
Yeah, dude. So we just moved out to we're moving out to. I might as well tell you guys. So we're moving out to Ohio, Akron, and then eventually
like
Cleveland,
another location
Ohio.
Or the whole company.
No, another location. So I have another trainer starting out there.
Wow.
And then I'll bounce back there every now and again, and then we'll hire a couple for there. And then we're going to move down to North Carolina eventually as well.
Oh, that's amazing.
So,
nice, man.
Yeah, one of my trainers who I just hired, who's with me now, she's a 20-something year veteran of 25-year practitioner of physical therapy. Wow. And she said, "Hey, I love helping people, but I love dogs. Been studying dogs," and gave me her whole resume. And I hired her, and she has 2 houses, one in North Carolina and here. So,
wow,
dude, isn't the world a funny fucking place? We got an email from someone in Spain, and shout out to Lucia, and she's a psychologist, right?
Yeah,
and she sent us an email and was like, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I'm a psychologist, but I really think I want to be a dog trainer." And we were like, "Go for it!" Like, that's cool. Like it's always interesting to see, just people are so different and talented in all these different ways, and all just decide to come together into dog training is way more interesting than I think people give it credit for.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah,
I mean, it also depends on the teacher, right? Like I've watched some dog trainers before, and I'm like, oof, like this is the human is not involved at all, and the human is not engaged at all. The dog will fail. Even if you're the best fucking trainer in the world, if the owner is not engaged, involved, and understanding that everything is being said, they will fail. I've said this once again, right? I say this line all the time, and then I listen to it might have been your interview with Michael Ellis or somebody else's. I think it was your interview, and he says it much better, right? As he should,
as Michael Ellis does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to butcher another one of his lines. Bless my heart. But he talks about, like, you could have the greatest dog training program in the world.
Yep.
But if you can't get the human to do, the human only does 20% of the program, that dog is not going to be as good as somebody who has an average program, but that human bought into the program 100%.
Dude, exactly.
And that is, that is everything, right? So it all comes down to the teacher. And we are not teaching just dogs. And realistically, we are, I don't know how you guys do in-home. So we do in-homes only. We don't do board and train.
Yeah.
I own a kennel, like a daycare boarding kennel. So I have a trainer who trains dogs that are there for overnight and whatnot.
Right.
But when you're training at somebody's house and you're there for 2 hours, and then in 3 weeks you're there for an hour, and 3 weeks you're there for an hour, you're not going to make, you're going to make a big difference in the dog's life in those 4 hours that you spend with it or whatever. But you better be damn good at teaching this human on how to deal with this for the next 20 days throughout your program.
Right.
And if you notice that people are struggling, like especially early on in my career, I'm like, okay, this dog's fixed. Then I would leave a house and be like, all right, dog's fixed, right? Dog's done. It should be perfect. Game, set, and over. And the people are struggling. I'm like, Jesus, are they just not competent? You should never think that way as a dog trainer. What you should do, and this is the hardest part of my fucking job, is every time there's a problem, I go, what did I do? And what do I need to change? Like, what did I do or not explain the right way? What did I do wrong? What should I change? Because listen, there's definitely times where it's the client's fault, right? I understand that, but you don't want to get into the mindset where you go, it's the client's fault. It's not. It's how do I explain this different? And I like my staff, and Jenny's on my staff too. I love Jenny. And you guys are going to really like this. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the show, I was talking about one of my mentors. And there's not many, oh, bless your heart. There's not many people that know this. So I'll explain it.
Is this a Dog Trainers podcast exclusive right now?
It is. Yeah. This is the first time I've ever said this in public.
This is wonderful.
So my uncle, Andy, the guy who taught me everything, one of the greatest people on the planet. My secretary's name is now Andy, and my secretary is now my uncle, who runs basically my company behind the scenes.
Wow.
Dude. So like 3 or 4 years ago, it's 3.5 years ago. Jesus, Andy, don't kill me. 3.5 years ago, we were, I was just getting over flooded. Like I had 4 employees and I was doing everything behind the scenes myself and training for 10 hours a day. So I was like, Andy, I need, can you be my secretary? He just retired. Right. And he's like, I don't want a full-time job. I'm like, I'd just be a couple hours a day. Now he's working like 11 hours.
Yeah. Thanks, Unc. That's dope.
Yeah. So that's my uncle, and he's the greatest fucking guy on the planet. He's also, he's somebody who won't let me get away with anything either. You know what I mean? Which I appreciate, because it's hard working with family. I don't, I've heard horror stories, but it's like, hey, you got to fucking do this. Like they've asked, you got to do. I'm like, all right, God damn it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
they keep you honest. They keep you on top of shit. Yeah. My mentor is still in my life, and he will be till the day he dies, whether he likes it or not. So that's just how it is.
Hey, question for you, man. So shifting gears a little bit, we're talking about the different trainers, including your uncle and all the amazing people on your staff who I was trying to write down to give them shout outs, but I couldn't get them quick enough. So I'm sorry. Do you follow, or have you followed any like R+ trainers, any like positive only trainers?
Yeah, I have. And I followed a lot more on TikTok at one point. And then I got off of it because it was negativity after negativity. Like when I see people start, because I see people start bashing tools or start bashing other trainers. Like I have one time in my entire career mentioned somebody by name, and like poorly, and I actually felt terrible after I did it. I was watching, and I'm going to say it here again so I can apologize again, but I was watching a Zach George video, and I'm like, dude, this is, and I said, I'm like, dude, this is not what you guys should be doing. This is really poor training in this video. And afterwards I'm like, hey, dickhead, why put that negativity out? Just show the right thing. You don't even need to put the guy on blast. But I do follow him just because I the guy is successful. I don't care if he's a good dog trainer or not a good dog trainer.
There's respect. There's respect on some realm. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, man. Go ahead. Finish your point.
I follow Denise a lot now.
Yeah.
I started following her probably right when Jonas was talking to her. I think is when I started following her, and I appreciate her. I think she's more balanced than she knows. And I think, and I think she admits that all the time too. She's like, I'm definitely more balanced than people think, but I appreciate her more than anything, her conversation. It's like, I don't really want to make a tremendous amount of friends who don't like what I do.
Right.
but I would at least listen to all of them. Right. I'm
Right.
never going to bash them. I'll listen to all of them, and I would say, oh, that's, that's a really interesting point of view. Thank you so much. So she's my new favorite on that front. And I've watched a lot of her stuff.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So the reason why I ask is because, and it's funny that you bring up Zach George, because, I watch a decent amount of Zach George stuff here and there too. What fascinates me about Zach George is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, your Instagram page is probably the biggest dog trainer's Instagram page I've seen. Well, like Balance Trainer's Instagram page. I know that Tommy Davis is probably like the biggest balanced dog trainer online, period, because of the YouTube channel.
I think YouTube, yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, though, Zach George is like the biggest dog trainer in the world right now.
And on
YouTube. And what's always fascinated me about him, because you're right, you're totally right, is I do hear him here and there talk about how tools are a mistake and stuff like that. And I'm just kind of like, all right, buddy, like get with the video, let's go, But what fascinates me about him that nobody can knock at all is the motherfucker apparently stays very busy, and also his camera skills are pretty good. Like he's very personable for the video and all that good stuff. The word that I use when I describe him is the polish is there, and I can appreciate that. And I just find that something worth mentioning when talking about these different trainers, because there are also, some other trainers who just spend all their time like bashing tools and, and everything else who Brent and I like. There's someone that we think of often, but we just don't want to name names, just not to give
Voldemort.
Yeah. But
I couldn't listen to Zach George anymore. He doesn't bash trainers because he's too busy plugging products. You know what I mean? But
honestly, I was inspired. I was like, wow, he's got like a subscription
a lot of
with,
endorsements.
And I'm like, well, but it just shows that it's possible. It's like Caesar,
yeah, for sure, good for. I mean, there's a little hate just because I'm like, dang, like that, okay.
But that's not even. That's just
20 minutes of before and after. Oh, and you should try this product. And also,
but that's the latest of it though. Like on top of the YouTube channel, which in and of itself makes money, and then he's got these endorsements. And then he had his TV show on Animal Planet, and he's got books, and he's got
and this is one of those things. It's like you can hate on what people are doing, or you could just go do something better, right? And hence 100%. The podcast, hence the podcast, right? Yeah. And so I've always been pissed. Like I love Caesar, right? And I love Caesar. He was that show. The format of that show was like one of a kind, right? But then you see a lot of these dog shows following the exact same format now. There's nothing special, right? No one's getting smarter or learning anything different. Or you see like YouTube videos. No one's getting smarter or learning anything different. You see some of these TikTok trainers. No one's getting smarter or learning anything different, right? And so I think I was getting angry at that. So fuck it. Let's do something different, right? And here we are. Ta-da.
I dig it. I like this a lot.
Thanks, man.
I listen to Jonas's episodes, Gada's episodes. I listen to Tom's episodes. I like those. Those were good ones too. They're just great. And for me, I listen to them because I know these people just via watching them on, just like anybody else, right? You think you know them, right? I know these people. Well, John, I talk to a little bit more, but via text and Messenger and whatnot. He's funny as hell. Yeah, he is. But when you listen to them, like, dude, these guys are people, and you listen to their stories, and you listen to them talk, and sometimes we forget about that. Like, the old, you don't know the person just because you follow them on Instagram, right? But you feel like you do. But when you listen to them talk, especially not for like a 20-second clip about dogs. When you listen to them talk and listen to their stories, and it's like,
you hear the passion.
Wow, there's a guy back there, there's a girl back there. So, this show's awesome. I really appreciate the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks. We really appreciate that you appreciate the show, because it's like, like this was initially intended for like newer dog trainers. And what's interesting is like, we've had like Larry Crone on here and Michael Ellis, and like some of these people have been doing it 20, 30, 40 years. And all of them kind of say the same thing. It's like, we're constantly learning. You're constantly learning something new.
Forever.
You're constantly a student. And, it's really interesting because, I was watching a martial arts thing. We talk about jiu-jitsu on this podcast all the time, thanks to Mariano. And,
he'll put it on me.
So much, it's your fault. There's so much parallel between like the martial arts, right? Art being the emphasis word, and dog training, the art of dog training, right? And you kind of see how you know, you can have different masters in karate and they all have slightly different techniques, but they all have similar foundations, you know, and it's crazy. It's crazy. And you can see how you interpret a move or a context, whether it's short distance, whether it's long distance, whether it's a mid-range attack, like all of that stuff is where the artistry is. And there's almost infinite amount of possibilities of how you could do something. Right?
100. Yeah. And not only is there a million possibilities on how you can do something, there's a million possibilities on how to explain it to somebody so they can understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is our bread and butter. I want to communicate with my clients. So I don't like to, you guys watch my videos. It's not like I'm a fairly smart human being, but I talk basically like a fucking average run of the mill Pittsburgh guy. You know what I mean? That's not like I say any of these giant words or anything like that, but I want to talk to my clients like they're my family or like my neighbor who doesn't need one smoke blown up their ass. Right. I'm not going to come over and be like, yeah, it looks great. And the dog's fucking lunging at me, but they also don't need belittled. Like, listen, you know, and that's something that's really, so literally I always have a new trainer with me, right? With me. And something that's important to understand. And I always kind of forget this too. I fall into this rut. Even the most minor detail, your clients don't understand it.
Right.
So if you kind of glaze over something that is a minor detail yet very important because you believe that everybody else has the knowledge that's inside your head, then you lose that relationship between the client and their dog, right? Because you forgot to explain something or you just didn't explain the importance behind it.
Right.
But yeah, and there's a million ways to explain that importance. It's just what's easiest for you to say.
And that's a good point, because part of me might skip. Back in the day, I used to skip over things because I've said it 100 times that week, or I've said it. And so I used to always do this thing, and my trainers who worked with me and my training assistants who worked under me, they'd be like, Brent, why you come up with new stories all the time? And I was like, because I got to figure out a way to say, like, kind of like Gary Vee. If you follow Gary Vee, he always says,
love Gary Vee.
Yeah, he always says, like, he's like, you say the same 12 things over and over and over in different ways. And he's like, yeah, that's actually the art of it. Like, how can I explain the same thing? How can I explain control? How can I explain, management? How can I explain it in a way that might be new, fresh, different? And it's funny enough, as much as it was also to try and get through to that client, that one client that maybe
what you're about to say, I love this.
I did it for my entertainment also.
100%, dude. You gotta keep it fresh, right? But that's the thing, because then you end up going through a script, right? And like anything, this is how you burn out. So you have to create new shit. And I try new shit all the time because I want to entertain myself.
Yes.
I want to see and I'm like, okay, well, hey, listen, I know this. These are bread and butter. This is going to this is why we're successful. I got an extra 15, 20 minutes.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's not like we're putting dogs. I'm not talking about, when I say try something new, I'm not saying, hey, I'm going to try a new leash technique because blah, 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 blah. I'm just,
try it in a different order.
Exactly.
Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, see if you can do 2, 3, 1, 4, and see if it works out, Yeah. Hey, everybody, it's Brent with the Dog Trainers Podcast. You want to know how to help us grow? By subscribing and leaving us a review. It helps others find us, ranks us higher on search results, and broadens our ability to connect with amazing listeners just like you. And now, back to the show.
All right, guys, again, welcome back to the Dog Trainers Podcast, and we thank you so much for listening, so let's get right back into it. So, Vinny, we've had, whenever we have guests on, we've been lucky enough to have some really prominent, well-known dog trainers on, and it's cool because a lot of them these days have kind of moved out of client dog training. Right now, they're kind of doing seminars or book tours or all these fancy things. But, I think it's actually really fun and kind of helpful to have someone who's still just straight up working clients day after day like we are and like most trainers who listen to this are. So, if you could, let's talk a bit more about just clients and dealing with that on a daily basis. And I think that you were saying you normally have a new trainer with you.
Yeah. So let's talk about the trench work, right? Because this is where all the knowledge is, right? Everything you read from a book, seminar, which is extremely important, you know nothing until you actually get your hands on a dog. Right. And I've been doing this a decade, and I see 4 or 5 clients every day, and I was seeing them 6 days a week, my first 5, 6 years. Now I'm seeing them 5 days a week, and we run group classes every fucking Saturday, every Sunday to a T. We run a group class with 32 dogs. You guys see those videos,
I love
and
those.
we pump it out. But this to me is, I have a really hard time I know I'm going to have to let go of this at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because I'm managing. I think we'll have 13 something employees. Managing a lot, but I love helping people, and I love the one-on-one aspect of it.
Yes.
And to Brent's point back earlier in the video where he said, you got to keep it interest. For me, seeing different people every day gives me a lot of life, right?
Yep.
Working with new people, finding out, their story, finding out about their dog, trying to investigate what they're telling me versus what the dog's actually telling me. That to me is everything. And I love that. I did do board and train for a very brief time, 5 years ago, maybe-ish. Don't quote me on that, but about 5 years ago. And I loved it, right? I like working with, just one dog and seeing how far you can take a dog, because you can really take a dog far, right? You can take them far. But I pride myself in being a human trainer. I pride myself on being, that's my best skill, is working with people. And I don't want to give that away. And I also think there's a huge market for it, right? There's a huge market, and you can get paid very well, and you can pay your employees very well for private training. Obviously, this is a business at the end of the day, right? And as much as, we all love this job, obviously we wouldn't be doing this and working fucking 16 hours a day if we didn't.
True.
But this is a business. And I think, from two standpoints, I learned a lot, training dogs every day. Like instead of just sitting home, running a business, so on and so forth, you just learn a lot. And you, like we talked about before, Brent, trying new shit, you learn a lot. We did the math on how many dogs I've seen, because I have, I think 1,200 appointments a year is what we measured out at. So you measure out 1,200 appointments a year, and how many people you see, and then how many dogs, because obviously the average family has more than one dog. And you're like, dude, that's a lot of dogs you get your hands on over the course of 10 years. That's a lot of skill. That's a lot of knowledge, which is why you get to a position where you're at, is just because of trench work, right? You got to fucking earn your dues. And that
you got to clean up that shit,
dude, 100%. I will tell you one thing that really fucking bothers me to a core. At one point, someone referred to me as a TikTok dog trainer. Not you guys. You said I was out there on TikTok. This was on I was on Good Morning America, and someone commented, he's a TikTok dog trainer
on national television.
No, it was about it, right?
Introduce you as that?
No. It was like before I was on the show, it was somebody said, he's a TikTok dog trainer. I'm like, hey, listen, I've been doing this 10 years, right? I just a little bit more respect than just the TikTok dog trainer, because then other fucking people say that shit too, and then but yeah, dude. So I think you can learn a lot by just going to see a lot of clients, especially if you have a lot of knowledge, and you can help them quickly, which is a beautiful thing. And I bring trainers with me. So right now I have Donna with me. She's been with me about a month. She'll be with me and other trainers for a few months, learning her craft and experiencing everything, because she understands it, right? She was the physical therapist, and mentally she is so far, just because she's been studying dog training for a long time. But more importantly, she's just a very, very intelligent human being. And the hardest part, like anything, is once you get your hands on it all, you're like, oh man, this is like, you're in it, right? It's different. And that's how they have to learn. And I don't, when you're teaching another dog trainer, you do not want to get upset. You don't, just like with a dog, right? Listen, you got to take your time. You got to put them in positions to win. You don't just go, hey, go figure that out. And then they fail. Then they get frustrated. Then they don't want to do it again. And then the cycle continues. And it sounds just like what? Just like training a dog, right? You put in a dog in a position, they don't know what they should be doing, and it's too overwhelming. They become frustrated. They shut down. The next time you try to do it, they don't want to do it. They have no drive for it. And you can see the same thing happen with people. And right now with Donna, right? So I actually have her tell me, what's the dog's issue? Like, what do you see? And she'll explain it to the client. Perfect. Or I go, let's walk that back. Now this is what's actually going on, but hey, that's awesome. Right. But that's how you learn.
Yep.
So she'll be with me, and then I have another trainer, Emily, who is an experienced dog trainer. She's been working dogs for 5 years. She's coming from Ohio to live in Pittsburgh for 3 months, then to move back out to Ohio. So she comes from a really good dog training business out in Ohio. We just happened to chat. We linked up. It worked out really well, and so I brought her to my team, and she came in for the first time, right? So we talked about 4, 5, 6 hours worth on FaceTime. I'm like, dude, this is perfect. This is, she's perfect for what I need. And she comes from a background of board and trains, a very good board and train program who uses e-collars a lot, right? That on every dog that comes in the program, they use e-collars, which is cool. It is what it is. And she goes, I'm most excited to see what you do because you don't use e-collars. And I'm curious to see how you can make behavior change. And so she came in on a Friday, and we had 3 new clients and a follow-up client. So our new sessions are like 2-ish hours, maybe a little over, a little under, right? Okay. So we had 2 new clients and then a follow-up session, or 3 new clients and a follow-up session. And I'm good at my job, right? I know I'm good at my job. I was as good as my job as I've ever been on this day, right? You were
just in the zone. Yeah.
Because you're like, oh fuck, she's coming out. She's another dog trainer.
Right.
I would want to fucking fly my flag out there and be like, dude, like this is the Say It Once brand, and I fucking rocked it, right? Just rocked it.
I love that.
And she she's like, I can't believe that you can do all of this in a session. Then what was more important was not just the session. We make our clients send us an update in a week, which I highly recommend clients do, or trainers do. You got to have them send an update because it keeps them honest. Fucking right. So you need to send me an update in a week, right? I want to hear it. Even if I don't care what it is, just send it to me. So I screenshotted the 3 updates and I sent them to her, and she was like, that is insane, right? How much change? Because we were working, one dog was an extremely fearful, reactive pit bull who wouldn't go for a walk and was just lunging at all these dogs, but in the building, in the apartment building, but wouldn't go for a walk outside of the building, right? So we worked that dog. And I was like, hey, I'm going to show you how to work a dog on a harness first. She's like, what? I'm like, well, a dog has a harness on. I'm going to show you how to, you can train a dog using anything. Anything, right? So the first dog she sees me fucking train is a pit bull in a harness for the first 15, 20 minutes. And I'm like, all right, then we went and got our slip lead. We worked the dog in a slip lead, did a couple of our figure 8 drills, mixed in with some shit that we do. And I went through my program, right? And she was, she was like, dude, this is awesome. I'm actually so excited. And I was more like, this is awesome. I'm excited because I always knew we were good, but I'm like, she's a great dog trainer. Yep. And it's nice to get that validation. And, my girlfriend was like, hey, are you nervous? Right. Cause I told her, I'm like, well, I'm excited. She goes, are you nervous? I'm like, I think I'm a little jazzed up. I'm like, I don't want someone to fucking come out here and be like, oh, he sucks. So yeah, man. So I bring the trainers with me, and I kind of went on a tangent. I'm known for doing that. I apologize.
But you bring it back. That's all that matters.
Yeah. But I love the in-home dog training. I think monetary wise, it's significantly better for myself and for my employees. My employees make a really good living, and because I would prefer that they're not my employees, I would prefer that they're my family, and I would like them to be here forever. Because it's nice that way. Like it's really, really, they're just good people. They're my friends. You know what I mean? They're not just my employees. And I think you can help more people. Like I said, I have 1,200 appointments a year. It's not like I see the same person 10 times. And the one thing that we do different, I am going to mention this. The one thing that we do different that other people don't is I don't offer packages. I offer a pay-as-you-go style training. I don't want you to buy 10 sessions because there's a chance I won't need to see you 10 times. And I don't want you to buy 5 sessions because there's a chance you may not like exactly what I do, even though you fucking see everything that I do online, right? I put it all out there. So I like hey, listen, if you want 7 appointments, great. If you want 1 appointment, 3 appointments, whatever it ends up being, cool. And what we start to see the trend of is we see our clients on day 1 And depending on how, what type of dog the issues were, as long as, depending on where we get our leash skills, because that's what we focus a lot on. And I talked about leash skills or life skills for a dog, because you can take a dog anywhere if you can take them on a leash, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Perfect.
the only requirement for a dog.
Yeah.
So if we can master these leash skills and we give them a program for their first few weeks and they get to a point where they feel confident, we bring them right into group class. Right after the first session, 2-3 weeks in, we're into class. We're around 32 dogs. We're learning these drills. And the dogs just fall in line because they see 29 other dogs who are following in line and following the same order. And then we go back in 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks, depending on the dog, and another group class. Right. And then maybe another 7 weeks, we'll go back to their house again.
I love that.
And then the group classes, more than anything else, one, it gives people interaction with them and their dog, and people crave this shit. People crave our classes. And two, it keeps them honest. It keeps them accountable. I'm going to go to this class. Vinny's going to fucking watch me. And he has
and so will everybody
1.7
else.
million followers. Exactly. He's going to embarrass me. So I got to fucking do it. Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we run our program in a nutshell. And I don't think I'll ever change from the in-home. I love it.
Yeah. I love teaching personally myself. I think both of us, I think that we're cut from a very similar cloth, you and I. We're both extroverts. We both get energized by people. We both have slightly
extremely good looking,
extremely good looking, little ADD-ish. And that creativity, right? Like, I love group classes, and it's kind of cool, because just recently I used to sell packages, and just when I started my own company, I was just like, fuck the old models, fuck this, fuck that, right? And the more dog trainers we get to talk to, like, the more we get to see like different formats of how you get the job done, right? Because when I started, it was you do a group class, you do a package of privates, or you do board and train, because that was the model my business did, right? And then and I realized when I started my own company, I was like, you can mix this up however the fuck you wanted, right?
There's no rules.
There's no rules. It's your own company, or you're the trainer, right? And what I really love is actually what you talked about, which is like, I do a couple privates and then I integrate them into group class right away, right? So I'll integrate them to a higher level group class. So all of our board and trains, what we do is we require them to do private lessons while the dog is in training. So if the dog's for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, they come every single week, A, to visit their dog, and B, to learn some shit, whatever that dog learns. So they have to learn the scaffolding as we're going up the ladder. Then what we do
I'm stealing that line. That's a great fucking line. Everybody who listened to that's a really, really good line. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to take this in because that is a very genius way to do things. I actually love that, Brent. Bring them in every week so they can learn
as much as possible. Yeah, as much as possible. Because like sometimes in board and trains, people are going on vacation.
Yeah, people are traveling, especially like right now, 4th of July and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you know who taught us that? We know who taught us that? Michael Ellis.
Michael Ellis, yeah.
Michael Ellis taught us that. And so ever
how
since
many
that,
times
Michael,
can we give one guy a compliment one day?
I mean, because he's a G. He's a G. But there's also, and he's probably not the one. He didn't invent that shit, but he's the one that met us and talked to us about it, right? And so that idea of so what we do in the board and train is we do that. We make sure that as the dog's scaffolding, that they learn every step of the way. Then we send the dog home. And then what we do is we offer private sessions for contextual issues, like maybe that dog's protective of their home. But all those private sessions are free from that point on, right? And then what we do is we offer unlimited access to all of our higher level group classes. So we have what's called an alumni course, and that alumni course is every graduate from a board and train program. That's where I have my 15 clients, in a group class that I was so proud of, but you do 30 something. And I was just like, I want to do 30 something, right? Simply because it looks cool. And I love people, and I love that vibe that you get in a group class. But anyways, so that's something that I've been able to kind of cultivate in my own company, and it's worked phenomenally. It's not only worked for me, as an entertainer, because I really like to entertain and talk to people and connect and kind of guide the crowd to do what I need them to do. But for my staff, what it's really done, and it's really helped them, because I don't necessarily do all the pre-go home lessons. My staff does. So their job is to teach leash fundamentals. Their job is to go to that client and teach, how to mark properly. Their job, whatever that lesson is you get to break down these very, very small lessons. And my newer trainers, people that have been with me 4 or 5 months, they get to kind of test their teaching chops, right? And one of the big things with my company is just a matter of like, you have to be a great educator. You have to work on being a good educator. And we actually, our episode before this episode, we talked a lot about what was it called again? Like, what did we call it?
It was called Teaching Owners to Lead, and we were talking about exactly this. So it was kind of funny because Vinny, you said that you were going off on a tangent, but it just so happens that you kind of walked right into a direction of what we were talking about in the previous episode, which isn't out yet. So it's
a sickness. I can't even help it.
Yeah, it's in the air.
Well, it's a pretty accurate. It's a cool sickness. So what we were talking about in our last episode, which will be up probably.
Well, it'll be up before
Monday,
this one,
right? Yeah, it'll be up a week before this one.
Yeah.
We were talking about the importance of teaching owners to be proper leaders for their dog, but of course that spills into how do you teach trainers to teach owners? And we were talking about Brent and I both kind of implemented this new program of bringing clients in before the board and train is done, like aroundish the same time. I was doing this thing to where I would bring them in just once. Like if it's like a 3, 4, 5 week program, I would bring them in once, like the week before the dog went home. And it was a nice way to kind of help sparse out all the information that you had to give them at the go home lesson. And it was a secret little benefit that I would tell owners about in like a joking manner, just to make it like fun for them because they're happy to see their dogs, but they have to leave them again. Dogs, depending on what the issue is, they see the owner and they're happy and everything's great and they do a lesson, but then the owner leaves and the dog's like, what the fuck? So they have one more week with me and they're kind of being a bit stubborn because they're like, where the hell is my mom? Which is great because then it allows me to make sure that we continue to push and we're not just like coasting out this last week and it stays beneficial and it stays like busy, So when we talked to Michael Ellis, then Brent and I tried that, we tried it out and we were like, you know what, let's do lessons with people every week. And like he was saying, sometimes they're out of town or whatever, but when possible, it's important to have them learn as the dog learns, not just kind of catch up after the fact. And the point that we were alluding to is something that was really beneficial for our trainers, for our staff, is to be able to run a lesson like this or even watch a lesson like this with a dog that, there is no stress or no pressure for the dog to look perfect because they're not done. And there is no stress or pressure for the owners because they don't have this looming feeling of like, shit, I hope I don't forget all this stuff because the dog's coming home with me and like, I want to make sure I get this right. You just have to focus for 1 hour and then go home. And then I'll see you again next week and same thing, right?
Yep.
And there's something very beneficial, at least in my view, about having owners literally see the dog learn. So like you'll bring an owner in.
They don't take the training for granted as much.
Right. Well, and I've noticed like to a profound extent, when owners see the dog go through their lessons, like the end of week 1, they come in for a lesson, we do food work or whatever the case, and they're like, oh, I get it. And I'm really focusing more on like timing and, do it like this and like this. And then week 2, when we progress on to the next thing, now that they've seen week 1 themselves, they're like, whoa, I get it now. Like I understand, not only do I understand what you're telling me today, I understand the correlation of this versus a week ago and so on and so on.
You Miyagi them.
Yeah, right. You waxed on, waxed off them, bro.
Yeah. So, but one thing that you're talking about, which I think is really important for trainers to understand as well, like as I'm watching this on my computer, there's an uploading thing, right? So there's a lot of information, a lot of data that's coming from this podcast that's going out to the web and it says 35% downloaded, right? Yeah. So if you do only one session at the end of your board and train or whatever it ends up being, what percentage of information are these people able to retain is the question. Now, and even if it's, so from my end, right, I see people a few times, right? So I make them do the legwork. I guide them through the process.
Right.
I, at the beginning, would always leave going, did I give them, I didn't give them enough, right? So I'd give them so much information and I would go back and I'm like, this is like my first few years, I would like give them everything. And they're like, oh my God, they're overwhelmed, right?
Yep.
And they didn't, exactly. They didn't perfect any of it.
Right.
Now,
Masters of none.
I go over and I have our 4 or 5 basic things I want to hammer out. And and now the person's able to retain all this, simplify it. You don't overstress the fucking human who stresses the dog out. Because once again, it all comes back to the communication from me to you, then from you to there. And there's gonna lose something in translation, right? From me to the owner. But the goal is to limit how much they lose, or how much they don't retain. So if you can get that person to understand, just like you're talking about now, and that's honestly kudos to you guys, because that is brilliant. That's a really good. I don't know when you guys started doing.
2-3 months ago, would you say, Brent?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. No, I think probably closer to 6. I think. I mean,
really? 6-7 months ago? Has it been that long since we've had Michael?
No,
on?
We had Michael Ellis back in March.
Oh my God!
Right when COVID started.
Well, a minute ago. Oh yeah, right when COVID. Oh yeah,
that was a
year
right. ago.
That was a year ago. Fudge.
Yeah.
This is season 2. I forgot.
Well, you want to know what's funny? So exactly like Mariano was saying, like you're echoing a lot of the stuff that we talked about in our last episode, and I just think that's because good ideas are. A lot of people have access to good ideas, right? And some of the things that we talked about, let's see, we'll just list them out to you real quick. So here's
something that we talked about that was like a more direct answer to your question. But before we answer the question, because I just have a quick question for you. Do you assign like homework to clients? You have like an email or something, a printout? No.
So this is you're gonna love this. Okay, I very early on learned that a scripted email that I send to them will never get done. I make them fucking handwrite everything at the end of the session.
You do.
In the last 15 minutes, they handwrite every single note. And people, can you just email this? No, you will write this down. I don't care if you're 80, you're going to write it down, and you need to write this down because you need to understand it. And my words, when I send it to you, are not going to make sense, but I'm going to explain it and I'm going to have it step by step because I want this drilled into your head on how it should be done. And ever since we started doing that, and we get a lot of people who go, who talk about how much they enjoy, hey, we can look back at our notes, right? And most of these people, especially families, not so much single families or older people, but when you talk about a family with kids, they're going to put these on their refrigerator, right? And they're going to go back to, hey, remember, let's go look at our rules. And did we do this today, guys? Or hey, maybe Vinnie said, oh God. Like,
Vinnie said, "You're the bad guy."
This one kills me, right? It's like when the wife says to the husband, or the husband says to the wife, "But Vinnie said, fuck with that dog trainer." It's like, dude, come on, you can't throw me under the bus. But I believe in my heart that because these people handwrite things down, they do it better and they do it more consistently and they remember it. So that's another thing that I really.
That's an interesting point, especially the notes part, because they may write something other than what you say, but just something that makes sense to them. I know exactly what you're saying, because whenever we have episodes of the podcast, whether we're interviewing someone or not, we have extemporaneous outlines, which is just a very basic like bullet point outline, right? And all the rest we just kind of freestyle it. And sometimes the notes that we have, they're misspelled, they make no sense. But we know what we're saying, So like we're glad nobody can see these show notes because they're not great. But so. To answer your question then, if you were to just do that was the question, right? If you were to just do like one lesson when the dog went home, how much information would the owner retain? Probably not much, maybe 30%. I mean, if we're talking over like, let's say over like the next 3 days, probably like 60-70%. And then over the next like 3 weeks, probably like 40%. And it'll just drop from there. And what's fascinating is, it's like a double-edged sword. There's just what they just didn't retain because you can only pay attention so much in an hour, especially when you're actively working with your dog on top of listening to the trainer. But also there's just, Brent and I were talking about this in our previous episode. People have their own standards and their own expectations. And so sometimes it's like you want the client to make the heel look like this, and they're happy with it looking just better than it was. Just don't lunge after cats or whatever. And I'm cool.
Just don't kill something. Yeah, that's
exactly. Right. Yeah. And so it's hard for us, like something that I've really been working on. It's something that I've really been echoing to clients lately, is I tell people, listen, as a trainer, I have my standards. Like I have my ideas of what this dog could look like and what, because I'm a competitive person. I like the dogs to look good, of course.
Right.
But this is your dog. And it's my job to work with you to come to a consensus of what I can get you guys to do that you're realistically going to want to do over the long term, because that's how we get success.
Boom. Yeah. So you have to come to grips with that as an owner or as a dog trainer, is that no owner wants a dog as good as you want a dog.
Right.
True. Yep.
And
100%.
that's hard, right? And especially if you're a competitive person, it's like, this is where you just have to go, listen, it's not your fucking dog, Vinny. It's not your dog, Brent, right? It's their dog, and I'm going to get them as good as they possibly want their dog to get. And I will help them get to that point. But that point may not be to as good as I want to get. Can I ask you guys a question? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Why do you guys do board and train versus just doing private lessons from your standpoint?
Well, you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I do board and trains primarily because I feel that in some scenarios, other than just having lazy clients, like I used to do board and train because it was convenient for the clients, but I put them to work now. Back then, again, the old board and train was like, it was more of like a ta-da, look what I did with your dog, and I hope you remember 30% of what I told you, right?
Right.
And nowadays it's like, okay, if I'm going to put this much work in, you're not off the hook, buddy. You're going to fucking learn with the dog, and I'm going to train both of you guys simultaneously. So when you guys go back home together, you don't fucking need me anymore. That's ultimately the goal. And so ultimately, board and train. Let's see, from a training standpoint, when it comes to creating a consistent product, I would say the consistent product of knowing how to learn, understanding markers, understanding cues, understanding, developing certain behavior, self-control, patience, that type of stuff. I think that's a lot more consistent in a board and train program, right? However, the downside is, the owner's desire to learn, right? What I've learned in the last year of doing you have to come to your sessions. Yeah. I can leverage the fact that they miss their dog to come and work with their dog, right? The fact that oh my gosh. And it's worked so well, and I'm using that power for good, because it's like, you want to come see your dog, you fucking come and you work with your dog. Mm-hmm. Versus, before it's like they would never come back for a follow-up. Mm-hmm. I'd be like, come and do a lesson with us. And they'd be like, nah, he's a lot better.
Let me check my schedule.
People are happy with better, right? And one of the quotes we did in our last episode that was, again, from Gary Vee. Gary Vee said, 100% of my clients do less than 50% of what I tell them to do, right? And when he said that, I was just like, yep. And so, people are paying him, millions of dollars for ad campaigns, and they do less than 50% of what they tell them to do. Right. And so what our prompt was in the last episode was, so let's assume an owner does 50% of what you ask them to do as a dog trainer. Is the goal to get them to do 60 or 70 or 80%, or is the goal to make the 50% that they do and that you do teach them? Is it the goal to make that 50% better? Mm. Like the potency of that 50% of what you offer.
Right. Like 50% of what Michael Ellis says is better than 100% of what, most other dog trainers in the world will say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
now, can I change the question then real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think this is great for dog trainers here. And honestly, I'm being very selfish right now because I love hearing you guys talk about.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick your brain about your group classes, so don't worry. Just ask away.
And if I say 100% again, just fucking mute me, right? I get into the mode where
there's 100% is said 100% of the time in every podcast.
That says 100%.
100%. Yep.
Dude, if you made that shirt, I would wear it. Like that, and you should make a shirt because I think it would be hilarious.
Yep.
It should be like, "Don't quote me," in quotes with your name on it. That would be fucking funny.
100%. Don't quote 100%.
But I'm sitting here having this conversation with you guys, and I'm thinking, son of a bitch, I wish you guys were around 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Just to pick your brain and listen to other people, just to listen to other people, how they run their business. There's small details that I'm picking up from your guys. From you guys, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to use this. This is now a learning experience for me, right?
Likewise,
absolutely. So we'll go with it.
There you go.
100%.
Absolutely.
See, now
100%.
you put it in my head, so I'm going to say 100% from now on, just to like piss you off. But
trained you very well, right? But my question, Brent, is, I understand it from a training standpoint. Mm-hmm. Now, what about from a business standpoint?
Oh, yeah. So from a business standpoint, I think it's the biggest chunk of revenue at any given time. However, when you take into consideration overhead and you take into consideration rent and you take into consideration, I make less money per hour.
I was going to say.
However, for me, it definitely allows a better output of product, right? To have a reputation of a good output of product, right?
Actually, I don't know. I would dispute that a little bit because dog for dog, you make less per hour with a board and train. But the thing about a board and train is you can have several dogs at once.
You can have 10, 20, 30,
right.
It depends how many you get. That's when, after a certain number, the ratio is really
right. Like the ratio becomes, but there is this divot. You're 100% right about that. Like there is this point of, if you're like right on the cusp, like I used to tell my girlfriend this all the time because I've only been here in Arizona for 2 years and like 3 months. And I had to rebuild my client base from the bottom up. And actually, while I was at it, I was still taking on clients from LA. I would drive over there, pick up the dog, train him, bring him back,
Right.
But I would tell my girlfriend this, if we have just one dog in for board and train, it's almost like a negative. It's like, damn, because now I'm stuck at the house because I've got a dog that I'm taking care of and have to train, but I'm only making like one board and train's worth of money. If I have a dog in and then like 2 or 3 other dogs come in at the exact same time, then I'm like, yes, because I'm still stuck at the house, but now it's like worth it, right? But then you get to that point where it's like, okay, well, if you have like 9, 10, more dogs and you have employees and things, then you still have a little bit of freedom. Like I'll still sneak away for like 45 minutes and go do a workout or whatever. But, but you're still making a decent amount of money when you consider you have like this many dogs all at once. So like whatever the weekly rate or however you break it down times 10 dogs, it stacks up. But I'll tell you a big reason that I like to do board and trains, because I focused for a good while, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, like before I left LA, I was more specialized in e-collar stuff because I was more specialized in dogs with certain behavioral issues for a minute. And something that I got really comfortable with telling clients who didn't know how to set boundaries for their dogs, which is often why the dogs had the issues that they had. And in fact, I just said this earlier today. I had an eval at 4 and we started this at 5:30. Was, honestly, guys, they have a shepherd, reactive, territorial around mom and dad. And I was like, listen, guys, I'll keep it real with you, because they asked me the same thing. Board and train versus privates. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I'm nervous to leave her alone. I'm nervous to let her go, and so on. And I'm like, well, check this out. I get you. And I promise you this. During very rare circumstances, like the dog's human aggressive or something, like I just, I'll just really insist on the board and train because it's safer for us versus coming into your house and like risking a bite and stuff like that. But short of that, if I, as a professional, think you'd be better off with a board and train, but you want to try privates, let's do it. I want to try. I want to give it a shot. And if you decide that I was right, then fuck it, let's go for it, right? And I'll just apply the difference to the board and train. But what I tell people, if they need to hear it, because it's our job to keep it real, is listen, man. I think, frankly, on top of everything else that I've explained to you, because the program will be what it is, whether it's privates or board and train. Like I'm going to teach the dog the same things, but I really think that this dog could use a break from you. And I'll be honest with you, I think you need a break from your dog too. Yeah. And like whenever I tell somebody that, they're usually like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. I guess I do this. I guess I do that. And it usually tends to be that moment where they're like, I guess I do put a little too much emotional baggage on my dog. Maybe I should just stop this or that. And I'm like, you see, and all I'm trying to do is give you guys a nice, clean little break from each other. You go and do your thing. You have some fun. It's a few weeks, whatever. And you're going to be here once a week anyway to see your dog. And we send updates on top of that, like videos and stuff like that. So it's nice to give the dog some distance from you and vice versa. And then you guys can jump up again fresh with a new skill set that both of you have, that both of you can pick up and run with. It's almost like rehab. It's like it's hard to rehab a really serious dog in the environment that's driven them to the point that they're at right now.
Absolutely, because the environment feeds the habits,
right?
And the habits feed the behavior. So I like that. I like that. And can I give a rebuttal or not a rebuttal, just my perspective? Because because there's trainers, the trainers that are watching. There's a lot of trainers. I mean, trainers now are popping up too. You guys see this. It's popping up all over the place, which is great. Right? It's like, once again, there's so many fucking dogs. I don't think anybody really is like, oh my God.
There's no shortage. There's no scarcity of dog.
Yeah, I wish all these trainers would stop. Just go.
Yeah. Dude. it's insane how many dogs are out there. Insane, right? It's overwhelming. So the thing that I look at, like when you guys first started dog training, like I remember I told you I have the notebook, right? I have my first notebook from Trigger. And in that notebook, I also have all of my first sales for my first 2 years before I moved to a fucking computer, right? Like like an actual civilian.
All your contracts.
Right? Yeah. She's like, Jesus, what am I doing? But I have, you have your first sales. And I was a 20-year-old kid. I remember my first year in business, I made 12,800 whatever bucks, right? And I was like, dude, this is great. In my second year, I grew, and it was I doubled, right? So I doubled we actually doubled our sales for, I think it was 6 or 7 years consecutive, right? Every year we doubled. So second year we're at like 25 grand. I'm like, okay, I'm doing great. My third year, I made $49,000. I almost made 50 grand a year, right? And I was thinking, I remember telling my dad, right? You guys remember the story about my father. And I remember telling my father, hey, Dad, I can fucking do this for the rest of my life, right? Because you think about, like, you're like, I can do this, right? And you're making a good living. You're like, 22 now, living at my parents' house, making a good living. The reason I bring this up is because from the trainers that I've hired from different areas, or from that actually have a training background, not just the other trainers that I've I don't want to use the word raised, but trained and so on and so forth.
Mentored,
yeah. And that's a good word. Wow, that
I raised. You said to their family to you. I guess there.
Yeah,
you birthed them.
Wow. It's just weird. Isn't that weird? That's weird to think about, though, right? You know what I mean? You're their mentor. That's a fucking weird way to put that.
Yeah. I'm the youngest brother of my family, and I'm the big brother for a lot of my people I mentor. So it's interesting.
That's crazy to think about it that way. I guess I just never looked at it like that. It's kind of humbling. So, but the reason I mention that is, we pay our trainers, we pay our trainers very well. And I listen to other people who are, especially a few people that I've gotten from board and train programs in the past. And these people are not making what I would perceive as enough money. And they're not making enough money for the work that they put in. Now, this is all from my eyes, which is, I forget what the scientific term here is, but this is just a very tunnel vision view, because I know there's people out there who run private, who run private in-home training sessions, who pay their trainers shit. I know there's board and train programs who pay their employees a very healthy wage, right? But it's like, I was always curious from that standpoint of how it worked financially for the owner of the business and for the trainers inside the,
Right, the trainers working under you. So there's a fascinating. You're right that there's a fascinating amount of like width in that department. So another interesting story, and like if I have something negative to say, I'm not going to name the kennel and name the trainers. There's just no need, right? But I will say this: here in Arizona, of course, I moved here, no client base. So first thing I did was I got a job. Right, I looked for kennels, and I was like, okay, well, let me hold myself over while I get my feet under me, build my client base up here, and then get back to doing Untamed. Right, so. I met with a couple different owners of different programs in the area, one of which, man, I just thought was ridiculous in all kinds of different ways. But one of the ways was they charge for a 2-week board and train, and there is no fluctuation. It's 2 weeks, period. We don't care, there's no option for more or less. And it's all e-collar all the time, doesn't matter, puppy, aggressive, whatever. So they charge, this shit is like robbery. Like they charge $2,200 or $2,400 in total for the 2 weeks. That includes the e-collar and stuff like that. The trainer who's training this dog makes $250 a week a dog. And this is what makes it worse though. Like Brent and I worked at a kennel where the dog stayed at the kennel, and and like all the overhead and all the risk and all the liability and all that stuff was there. We just kind of come in, train the dogs, deal with the clients. These dogs for this company go to your house. You're hired on as a private contractor, so it's your job to have your own insurance, your own everything, for $250 a week a dog, and you can only have 2 dogs at a time. And if they find out that you're training other dogs on the side, they will go after you legally.
Yep.
I was like, how is somebody supposed to make a living here?
But you're a contractor. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, yeah, and that's fucked up too. But
if you're stealing clients, I get that. But if you're just like if you're poaching clients, I understand. But
The way I
but
perceived
now when
it,
you're getting
because
paid shit, so I get that,
dude.
also.
Well, the way that I perceived it, just based on everything else, because they were also going through my history. Like, do you know how to train with this? And I was like, well, yeah. Okay, well, we don't use all that. We go straight e-collar, and they were, going through hypotheticals. Like, well, tell me how you'd walk this dog from beginning to end, and I go through it all. And they're like, well, we typically don't do this, and this. We just go straight to e-collar because we only have 2 weeks. And I'm like, why don't you do 3 or 4 weeks? But in any case, though, they paid these trainers. Like, honestly, dude, they were telling me the reason why they're hiring, they were booked out like 4 or 5 months in advance. And mind you, I had just moved to Arizona. So I'm like, if you morons are this booked out, like, I can't wait to, but it made me sad almost, because I'm like, whose trainers' backs are you breaking that are working? Like, I can't wait to poach your trainers, because this is like stupid. Why would somebody work for? Go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
the thing. Yeah. Young trainers, you need to know your worth, right? You need, but now on that same token, because this is a very,
you also got to earn your stripes too.
You gotta fucking put your work in the trenches, right? Yeah. So when I say you got to know your worth, that doesn't, that does not mean that you deserve everything without working for everything, because I came and I come from a background, and I hope to God this background stays within the community of, you have to fucking put in the work, right? Right. Yep. Yeah. And when I say know your worth, that just means, like, you shouldn't get treated like shit. Right. You know what I mean? You should never get treated like shit. And everybody hears horror stories. And I was curious. I appreciate the conversation more than anything else, just from a knowledge standpoint for me. And I know that I will be out west at some point, and I'm very looking forward to hanging out with you guys.
Come and hang out with us. I love that. I would love that.
Dude, so you're in the Berg. What's coming up? Maybe we can make it a point to go out and say hi.
Well, I mean, we're going to New York, but we can also do a trip to.
Yeah, stop in Philly, because I hear it's nicer.
Fuck yeah, exactly.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope that you enjoyed this episode and can't wait to be back with you guys. Be sure to follow us at Dog Trainers Podcast on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't forget to punch the hell out of that subscribe button and leave us a review.
Remember, guys, this is your podcast. You're the best listeners in the world, and we'll see you next time.